Rain streaked down the floor-to-ceiling windows of the high-rise boardroom, a perfect view of the city the CEO claimed to own. But all eyes weren't on the skyline. They were locked on the man standing alone at the end of the table. A janitor's badge still hung on his chest. A delivery bag slumped beside his mud-stained sneakers. And yet, he didn't flinch. "Let me get this straight," the CEO sneered, chuckling as he leaned back in his leather chair, flanked by polished suits. "You mop our floors by night and deliver burgers by day? And you expect us to take you seriously?" The room laughed, but the single dad didn't. He stared at the CEO, jaw tight, fists trembling, and then reached into his jacket. Silence. Then he pulled out a photograph, crumpled, tear-stained. A little girl's face smiled back. "My daughter's homework," he said, voice cracking. "She wanted to know if dreams expire, if they run out for kids like her. So yeah, I mop floors, I deliver food. I do whatever it takes." The room fell silent. Then he said something that made the whole room sit up, even the CEO. And that's when everything changed. Rain streaked the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 42nd floor boardroom, blurring the glowing skyline behind a thick fog. Inside, sharp suits and silk ties leaned back in their chairs, half listening, until he spoke. Daniel Reyes stood at the far end of the long mahogany table, calloused hands clenched at his sides, a delivery bag sagging from one shoulder. Janitor's badge still clipped to his chest. His sneakers were soaked. His eyes were red but steady. Across the room, the CEO chuckled. "Let me guess. You sweep the floors at night and deliver chicken wings by day. And you want a seat at this table?" Laughter rippled. Daniel didn't smile. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded, slightly crumpled paper. Not a resume, a child's drawing. Crayons, messy handwriting, a son. A stick figure labeled Daddy. "She asked me last night," Daniel said, his voice cracking, "if dreams expire." Silence. "She said, do they run out for kids like me?" No one laughed now. And then Daniel looked the CEO dead in the eye. "You mock me, sir. But I promise you, my value doesn't fit inside your briefcase." Long before the boardroom and the mocking eyes, there was a small one-bedroom apartment in East Willow. Faded walls, leaky sink, a second-hand crib in the corner. It smelled of detergent and baby powder. That's where Daniel Reyes built his universe. He wasn't born for this life, not in the way you'd expect. Once, Daniel had dreams. Architecture, blueprints, towering ideas made of steel and light. He graduated from a decent college, a scholarship kid with dusty shoes and fire in his eyes. But life has a way of folding in on itself. By 27, Daniel had traded sketchbooks for mop handles. The job market chewed him up, bills piled in, and after his partner left, he stopped chasing buildings and started chasing survival. He worked the graveyard shift at Green Rock Towers, cleaning office floors, while CEOs slept. In the afternoons, he ran deliveries for 2 food apps. And in between, he raised Lena, his 7-year-old daughter, with laughter, lullabies, and leftover takeout meals. People called him invisible. Tenants stepped over his mop bucket without looking. Waiters handed him bags like he was part of the wall. But to Lena, he was everything. "You're my superhero, Daddy," she whispered once, curling under his arm after another 18-hour shift. And for Daniel, that was enough. Every day blurred into the next. 4:45 a.m., alarm buzzed. Daniel moved like a ghost through the apartment, careful not to wake Lena. By 5:15, he was sweeping floor 11 at Green Rock, earbuds in, mopping to old soul music that reminded him of his mom. Scrub, rinse, repeat. At 9 a.m., he changed in a janitor closet into a red hoodie and worn jeans, then dashed to the food app parking lot. His phone lit up with delivery orders, burritos, coffee, Thai lunchboxes, run, tap, Drop. Back home by 2:30 to pick up Lena from school. They shared a snack on the cracked leather couch. She showed him drawings. She wanted to be a sun designer. Whatever that meant. By 6 o'clock, he was napping with one eye open while she colored. Then back to Green Rock by 9 p.m. for the night shift. He'd sometimes find sticky notes she slipped in his lunchbox. I love you X3, oh. Don't forget to eat. I believe in you. One night, he caught his reflection in a dark office window, sunken eyes, crusted mop water on his jeans. He barely recognized himself, but this was the cost of being both mom and dad. And Daniel never complained. The baby monitor crackled softly that night. Lena was only 3 months old, bundled like a burrito in a thrifted pink blanket. Her tiny fists twitched as she dreamed, cooing gently in her crib beside the open window. Daniel tiptoed across the apartment, heating formula on the stove when he heard the front door click shut. He turned. Melissa stood there, Lena's mother. Jacket in hand, eyes glassy, a silence choking the space between them. You went out? He asked gently, placing the bottle down. She didn't answer. Her eyes dropped to the floor. I packed a bag. Daniel's heart dropped. A bag? I can't do this, Danny. I can't live like this. The bills, the noise, the crying. I miss who we were. Daniel moved slowly, his chest tightening. She's 3 months old, Mel. I'm not built for this kind of life, she whispered. You're strong. You'll figure it out. And just like that, she stepped past the crib, past Daniel, barely touching the sleeping baby's hand, and walked out. Daniel stood frozen in the doorway, the warm bottle still in his hand. The silence in the apartment suddenly roared. It was louder than Lena's cries, louder than the traffic outside, louder than his heart breaking. He fed Lena that night with trembling hands. And as she stared up at him with innocent eyes, he whispered, Don't worry, baby. I'm not going anywhere. He never said Melissa's name again. Not in front of Lena. The rhythm of Daniel's life became a song only a few could understand. Not a melody of ambition, but of survival. He worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3 during holiday peaks. Mornings disappeared in a blur of coffee-scented hallways and elevator buttons. Nights echoed with mop strokes and vending machine buzzes, but every choice revolved around Lena. He clipped coupons like a scientist, cut his own hair in the mirror, wrote fake letters from Santa because she deserved magic, even in a 1-bedroom apartment with a flickering hallway light. His neighbors began to notice. The elderly lady on 3B started leaving extra bread by his door. The deli guy tossed in free milk when Lena came along. A quiet, invisible respect formed for the man who never asked, never broke, never bragged. Still, there were moments. Lena's school had dads and donuts. He arrived straight from a 12-hour shift, eyes bloodshot, still in his janitor's uniform. Some dads glanced his way. Polished shoes, buttoned shirts. One even whispered, Guess someone missed the memo. Daniel heard it, but then Lena ran into his arms, powdered sugar on her cheeks. My daddy smells like soap and French fries. She giggled. Daniel just smiled. She didn't care what he wore. She just cared that he showed up. It was a Wednesday, quiet, gray, with rain threatening the edges of the sky. Daniel pulled into the apartment parking lot after a long morning shift. His knees ached. His fingertips were cracked from the bleach water. But Lena's drawing sat folded in his pocket. A lighthouse with Dad, scrawled in purple marker. He checked the mailbox on instinct. Bills, flyers, and then a thick envelope. Embossed lettering. The logo of the private school he'd been saving for. Lena's dream school. The one with the music room, the reading garden, the after-school art studio she talked about every night. He tore it open, standing beside the rusted mailboxes. Dear Mr. Reyes, thank you for your application to Marigold Academy. After careful review, we regret to inform you. The rest blurred. His hands dropped to his sides. A gust of wind tugged at the letter, but he didn't let it go. He had saved for 2 years, cut out every comfort, applied for every scholarship, sat through interviews where he wore his one good shirt and tried not to look exhausted. And still, not enough. When Lena came home that day, bouncing in her jelly shoes, he forced a smile. She asked, "Did the letter come?" He lied. He said it hadn't arrived. Later that night, as she slept, Daniel stood by the window, letter crumpled in his fist, whispering, "Just once. Can this world not tell her she doesn't belong?" A week later, he tried again. Daniel sat across from the school administrator, a stiff man in a cardigan and gold-rimmed glasses, flipping through Lena's files like he was browsing a catalog. "She's bright," the man said. "Charming, but..." Daniel leaned forward, clutching the edges of his knees. "But our scholarship committee has to consider stability," the man continued. "2 jobs, no maternal guardian, incomplete financial documents. I'm afraid it paints a picture." "A picture of what?" Daniel asked, voice calm but strained. Man looked up. "A high-risk applicant." Daniel felt his heart punch the walls of his chest. "I work every hour to keep her safe. She has straight A's. She's never missed a day of school." The administrator offered a thin smile. "Sometimes effort isn't enough." Daniel stood, fists clenched. "Then what is?" The man didn't answer. Daniel left the office dizzy with rage, walking straight past the school gate where Lena stood. Clutching a paper sunflower she made in art class, she ran up. "Did they say yes this time?" He looked down at her bright, hopeful eyes, swallowed his pride. "They said, maybe next year." It was a Friday night when Daniel's body finally gave up. He was running a late delivery. Thai noodles, 20 floors up, the skyline sharp and glowing behind him. His phone buzzed with the next order as he rushed down the stairwell. Elevator was broken. Again. By the 12th floor, his breath hitched. By the 8th, his knees buckled. At the 5th floor landing, he dropped the delivery bag, sat down, then slumped sideways. He didn't pass out dramatically. There was no camera to catch it. No gasping, just silence. He woke up to a buzzing phone, blinking lights, and an ice-cold sweat. His heart pounded like fists on a locked door. When he got home, he didn't tell Lena. He tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and whispered that everything was okay. Then he sat in the bathroom, knees to his chest, shaking. The mirror didn't lie. Dark circles, sunken cheeks. A man worn paper thin. He stared at himself. "If I go down, she's alone." And that truth hit harder than anything. He couldn't afford collapse. Not now. Not ever. Daniel didn't talk much about his past. Not because he was ashamed, but because it felt like another lifetime. Another man. But one night, while scrubbing the marble floor in a downtown cafe lobby, he ran into someone who did remember. "Daniel Reyes?" A voice called out, sharp with disbelief. He turned. A man in a fitted blazer, polished shoes. Jeff Carraway, former classmate. They'd studied architecture together, pulled all-nighters designing dream cities. Daniel stood, mop in hand. Jeff blinked. "Man, I haven't seen you since senior year. I thought you were in Chicago." "Weren't you supposed to intern at O'Connell and Bright?" Daniel forced a smile. Life had other plans. Jeff looked uncomfortable, shuffling. "You were the best in class. They said your final project might get published." Daniel shrugged. "Now I build dinner routes instead of bridges." Jeff laughed awkwardly. Still, nothing wrong with honest work. They both knew what he really meant. After Jeff left, Daniel sat on the lobby steps. The silence of the empty cafe felt heavier than usual. He thought about the blueprints gathering dust under his bed. The notebooks with Lena's crayon drawings mixed between floor plans. The part of himself he buried beneath utility bills and double shifts. He whispered aloud, Not to anyone, not even to Lena. I used to dream in glass and steel. And now, he just dreamed of keeping the lights on. It happened at a school fundraiser. Daniel was invited, or rather, Lena was. Her art class was being honored, and all parents were encouraged to attend. He wore his best shirt, ironed carefully in the steam of his own bathroom. Borrowed slacks. A pair of shoes he hadn't worn in 2 years. The ballroom was all chandeliers and clinking glasses. Smiles that didn't reach the eyes. He stood by the punch table, watching Lena beam as her painting was unveiled. A messy but heartfelt picture of their apartment window at sunset. She calls it, "My Daddy's Light." The teacher said proudly. Then came the whisper, "A couple." Near the table, one man chuckling to the other, "Nice piece. Wonder if her father's the janitor or the Uber guy." Daniel turned slightly. Their eyes met. "Oh," one of them said. "You're her dad?" "Sorry, Daniel smiled tightly. "You just assumed I don't belong here?" the man stammered. "No offense meant." Daniel nodded, still smiling, but inside something twisted. He took Lena home early that night. She talked the whole drive, proud of her ribbon. He didn't say much. Just drove, one hand on the wheel, the other clutching her art. And in his heart, a quiet promise grew. Someday, she'll be in a room like that, and no one will dare ask if she belongs. It was supposed to be for her teacher. Lena had scribbled the title in blue marker. "My Hero," a short essay assignment tucked inside her unicorn backpack. Daniel found it by accident while cleaning up her crayons. The folder had fallen. Open on the floor. He hesitated. Then read, "My dad works more than any superhero. He doesn't fly, but he runs really fast when I get sad. He doesn't wear a cape, but his shirt always smells like soap and French fries. But sometimes I think he's tired. Like tired in his bones." One time I asked if he was happy. He said, "I'm happy because I have you, but I think maybe he misses being seen. Sometimes people ignore him when he brings me to school. They look at their phones." One time Mom called him to help. "I don't want my daddy to feel small. I want to grow up and build a big stage where only kind people are allowed. My daddy can sit in the front row." Daniel blinked, then covered his mouth with his hand. He didn't cry loudly. Just sat on the edge of her bed, the letter shaking in his grip. Lena was asleep in the other room, curled around a stuffed fox. He kissed her forehead gently, whispered, "I'm so proud of you," then folded the letter and placed it back. In that moment, something inside him shifted. She had seen everything. 2 weeks later, a flyer appeared on the building bulletin board. Community Forum on Education Access, Town Hall Meeting, Public Speakers. "Welcome." Daniel stood in the elevator, reading it over and over. His hands trembled slightly. He didn't know what he'd say, but he knew he couldn't stay quiet anymore. That night, after Lena went to sleep, Daniel stood in front of the mirror, trying to speak out loud. His voice cracked. He stammered. He stopped mid-sentence, angry at himself. Who would listen to a janitor with calloused hands? But then he pulled open the drawer beneath his bed, the same one that hid his old college sketchbooks. And tucked inside was Lena's letter. He read it again. "I want to grow up and build a big stage where only kind people are allowed," he exhaled. Then pulled out a pen and scrap paper from a pizza box. Began writing. The next day, he signed up for a speaking slot. The volunteer at the desk asked for his job title. He paused, then said clearly, "Father." She smiled, writing it down. And just like that, Daniel Reyes, the man who had been invisible to so many, decided it was time to speak. For Lena, for himself, for every parent who'd ever been told their best wasn't enough. The parking lot was empty except for a flickering streetlight and the soft hum of a vending machine. Daniel sat alone in his rusted Toyota Corolla, delivery bag on the passenger seat. Window cracked just enough to let the autumn air cut through the heat. He held the paper in his lap, 4 pages, creased and smudged. His heart pounded. Sweat traced his spine even though it was cold. He cleared his throat. My name is Daniel Reyes. I'm a father, a janitor, a delivery guy. He stopped, shook his head. Tried again. I'm a man trying not to drown. The words sounded too raw, too vulnerable. He tried to tighten them, make them tougher. But every time he changed the lines, Lena's voice echoed in his head. I want to build a big stage where only kind people are allowed. So he stopped performing and started speaking from the gut. He practiced between deliveries, between mop strokes, between moments when exhaustion nearly took him under. He spoke to his dashboard, to the blinking microwave clock, to the bathroom mirror after Lena fell asleep. He stumbled, paused, rewrote, then rehearsed again. By the third night, the words no longer scared him because he wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was trying to be heard. And when the night of the town hall finally arrived, Daniel didn't bring a script, just Lena's crayon drawing, folded in his jacket pocket, the one that said, My Daddy's Light. The auditorium was brighter than he expected. High ceilings, sterile lighting, metal chairs filled with a mix of community members, school board officials, and a few news cameras rotating silently in the back. Daniel sat near the edge of the stage, fingers knotted in his lap. Names were called. A business owner spoke about taxes. A teacher complained about curriculum cuts. A lawyer defended zoning laws. Then, Daniel Reyes. Floor is yours. He stood slowly. Walked toward the mic. The podium felt taller than it should. He looked out, saw the same kind of faces who passed him daily without a glance. He took a breath. My name is Daniel Reyes. I clean your buildings. I deliver your food. And I raise a daughter who thinks I'm a superhero. A murmur swept the room. A few phones lifted. He continued, voice steady. I've worked every hour I can find. Not because I want your sympathy, but because I believe she deserves more than what I was handed. He reached into his jacket, pulled out Lena's drawing. This is what keeps me going. And then, without warning, his voice cracked. He paused. Eyes welled. One hand gripped the podium as he tried to steady himself. She asked me if dreams expire, he whispered. If they run out for kids like us. The room fell still. He blinked hard. Swallowed. I told her they don't. But now I need someone in this room to prove me right. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished, but it was real. And sometimes that's louder than anything. As Daniel stepped down from the podium, silence lingered in the room like a held breath. Then, from the front row, a voice sliced through the air. Inspiring, the man said dryly. But let's talk about reality. Heads turned. Cameras swiveled. He was sharp-jawed, tailored, unmistakably corporate. Robert Calloway, CEO of Oak Ridge Ventures, a major donor to the school board. Silver watch, slick hair, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You expect us to revise admissions policy because a janitor gave a speech, he said, standing slowly. Let's be honest, Mr. Reyes. If you worked harder, smarter, maybe your daughter wouldn't need a pity scholarship. A few gasps rippled. Someone whispered, did he just say that? Daniel didn't move. His eyes locked onto the man. Calloway smirked. You work 2 jobs? Sounds like 2 failures, not 1 success. Laughter, nervous, restrained, came from the back. Daniel inhaled, deeply. His fingers brushed the folded drawing in his pocket. He took a step forward. His voice low. I don't want your pity. I want your honesty. So tell me, what do you really teach your kids? That money is value. That people who clean your offices are invisible. Calloway raised an eyebrow. You see a floor mopper, Daniel continued. My daughter sees a mountain mover. And that's the difference between you and me. The smile vanished from Calloway's face. And for the first time all night, Daniel wasn't just speaking, he was being heard. The room waited. Even the Cameras blinking quietly at the back seemed to freeze. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't pound the table. He just stepped into the center of the stage and looked around slowly. At principals, donors, teachers, parents, eyes locking with each one like a match being struck. "I work 2 jobs," he said again, quietly. "One for money. One for meaning." A few brows lifted. "The first keeps the lights on. The second is the one no one pays me for. That's the job where I read bedtime stories with my eyes barely open. The job where I sew her backpack when it breaks. Where I show up to every school event wearing the same shirt, because it's all I've got." He turned back to the CEO. "You think that makes me a failure?" He paused. Double quote, "Sir, your money builds buildings, but my daughter, she builds people. One day, she vote, she teach. She raise kids who don't laugh when someone walks into a room smelling like soap and French fries." Silence again. Then he reached into his jacket, pulled out a second drawing, this one newer, still wet with paint. It was a stick figure at a podium, surrounded by hearts. "She made this last night. Saad, you're gonna speak for both of U.S. He held it up, eyes shining. "So here I am." And the room, every single person in it, leaned in, not just watching him now, but rooting for him. A heartbeat of silence, then a sound like wind shifting through trees. Someone stood up. A teacher in the back row, hands trembling, eyes wet. She clapped, once, then again. And then another. And another. Soon, the room shook with applause, but it wasn't polite. It wasn't corporate. It was raw, surging, human. A janitor, a father, had just reminded them all what they'd forgotten. Robert Calloway sat frozen, his smug veneer cracked. Even he couldn't look Daniel in the eye anymore. Camera flashes went off. Reporters scribbled. Someone shouted, "Give that man a microphone every year." The school board president stood next. "Mr. Reyes," her voice cracked, "on behalf of the district, thank you for reminding us why we do what we do." Daniel didn't bow, didn't wave. He just turned and walked off the stage. But just as he reached the stairs, a student stood up from the front. His daughter. Tears in her eyes, cheeks flushed with pride. She ran to him. The whole room turned quiet again. And in front of everyone, the donors, the board, the press, she wrapped her arms around her father's waist and whispered, "You were never invisible." Daniel knelt, cupped her face. He didn't cry, but his eyes were oceans. From the back, the same nurse from the hospital hallway, the one who saw him saving lives without needing credit, watched and smiled. And as the camera panned over the crowd, every face told the same story. They didn't just see a janitor anymore. They saw a father, a fighter, a man who stood up and made the world listen. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. Sealed in gold, crisp white envelope. Daniel opened it with trembling hands at the kitchen table, his daughter bouncing beside him. "Dear Mr. Reyes, we are thrilled to inform you." She screamed. He blinked. "Reread it 3 times, she'd been accepted. Full scholarship." He held the letter to his heart. Not because of the money, but because it meant one thing. They believed in her, because she believed in him. News of the speech had gone viral, not just on school forums, but across the city. Articles titled, "The Janitor Who Spoke Truth to Power," "The Father Who Changed the Room." An anonymous donor stepped forward, pledging a yearly scholarship in his daughter's name. The Invisible Hero Fund. At work, people greeted him differently now. Not out of pity, out of respect. And every night, when he walked through the school halls, the kids smiled wider. One even said, "Hey, Mr. Reyes, I want to be like you." Daniel chuckled. "Then start with cleaning up after yourself." They laughed. At home, his daughter painted a new drawing. It showed him on stage, but this time, the crowd wasn't clapping, they were standing, and beneath the drawing, in shaky 10-year-old handwriting, it read, "Sometimes the loudest man in the room is the one who cleans it. Daniel framed it, hung it in the living room, not for pride, but as a reminder, you don't need a title to be heard. You just need the courage to speak. He never wanted a medal. He never needed applause. All Daniel Reyes ever wanted was a world where his daughter could dream a little louder, where a man who worked with his hands wasn't dismissed for his uniform. In a room built for power, it was love that echoed loudest. Maybe that's what they all forgot, that courage doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it wears dirt on its shoes and holds a crumpled photo close to its chest. So the next time someone mocks the man sweeping the floor, ask yourself, who are you really clapping for?